这一次为什么胆子这么大，要一头扎进来就台湾问题挑衅中国，而且摆出一副绝不妥协的死硬态度。现在出来很多相关分析，有人说日本主动发起挑衅，目的是要拖美国下水，让美国早日启动美日安保条约。而美国不会中计，因为从来都是狗咬尾巴，不能尾巴咬狗，主人怎么会受奴才的摆布？还有人说特朗普商人出身，可能不太懂什么是战后国际秩序，我们要注意提醒他日本要翻案的阴谋诡计。甚至还有人说美国已经改变战略了，准备和中国G2共管世界。等等这些说法我认为都不靠谱，都没有下面这段视频说的一针见血。我们先来看看这两位博主是怎么说的。
Brian Berletic actually did a video on this, on this situation between Japan and China, and I think Brian makes a correct point, a correct assessment in his analysis, which is that Japan would never be doing any of this without some approval in the United States, very, very high up, very significant approval from the United States. So if you assume that the United States is behind pushing Japan towards some sort of aggressive posture or saber rattling against China, what message does Trump take from this, given that Xi Jinping is basically telling him, bring Japan to heel? I mean, where do we go from here? Are we going to see a repeat of Project Ukraine, or will some more sensible, pragmatic, rational people in DC say, you know what, we decided to test China? Maybe that was the purpose of this. I don't know. Maybe there's something more to it, but whatever. We decided to do this. Obviously, China's not going to have any of it. We couldn't get the better of China in a trade war. You know, that ended very quickly with China basically saying no rare earths, and we had to back off from that. Let's not push it militarily, at least for the moment. Where do you think this is going to lead to?
Yes, the first thing to say is that I completely agree with Brian. It is inconceivable to me that any Japanese government, even a very nationalist Japanese government, would involve itself in the Taiwan issue unless it was confident that it had the support of the United States. In fact, I would go further than this. There's been lots of discussion about Taiwan in the American military media, but also the Neocon media. And what the United States has in fact been trying to do, or at least when I say the United States, the military people and the foreign policy people who have the objective of trying to contain China and who have been quietly leveraging the situation in Taiwan to try to move Taiwan gradually, slowly towards some kind of independence from China, because they see Taiwan first and foremost. And I think I want to say this as a major naval base and position that the United States needs to retain if it is to retain control of the Pacific. This goes all the way back, by the way, to the 1950s. Douglas MacArthur, you know, the famous American general, wrote a memo all the way back in, I think, 1950, in which he spoke about Taiwan as being the key to American control of the Pacific. If the United States were supposedly to lose Taiwan, it's an extraordinary thing to say, by the way, losing Taiwan, but anyway, if they were to lose Taiwan, or if Taiwan were to fall under, using MacArthur's words, communist control, that would open the way for the Chinese who have an increasingly powerful navy, to contest the Pacific, control of the Pacific against the US fleet. So there's been a lot of this discussion going on. And the US has been saying to itself, well, you know, we're being outproduced by China in naval construction. The Chinese have just unrolled their first super carrier, and they've got two other smaller carriers, and they're building up their navy very, very fast. So what we need to do is not just contest China with our own navy, where the odds are starting to shift, the balance is starting to shift in China's favor. But we've got to involve our allies as well. And that means the Philippines and South Korea. But South Korea can't be completely relied upon because it's got its own prickly relationship with China. And anyway, it sometimes gives impressions of wanting to go its own way. And the Philippines is not a powerful industrial country. The powerful industrial country in this area, which is our ally, is Japan. And there's been a lot of talk for quite a long time about enlisting Japan's help. And Japan has a significant navy to try to defend Taiwan alongside the United States. So I think this is where this comes from, actually. I don't think this has come out of the blue. And I think this is one of the reasons also why the Chinese have reacted so strongly, because Japan is a significant industrial and military power in East Asia. And it is also, by the way, a country which could quite quickly acquire nuclear weapons should it choose to do so. So this touches on many Chinese raw nerves. Now, the extent to which Trump himself is involved in any of this, I think is massively open to doubt. What he needs to understand is that this is a very dangerous situation, which could very easily escalate in ways that would be dangerous for the United States and for him. Because if the Chinese get the sense that the Japanese and the Americans are now ganging up against them over an issue like Taiwan, which is a very red button issue in China, then the Chinese will start to take countermeasures. And they will start to take countermeasures that will extend beyond the very significant military buildup that is going on in China at the moment. It could very easily lead, for example, to the Chinese again restricting exports or further restricting exports of rare earths, stopping exports of rare earths to the United States in order to upset the American military buildup. They would say this has nothing to do with economics anymore. It's nothing to do with trade.
Right.
It's about Taiwan. It's about military affairs. So we can't arm our own military enemy. So we could see all of that restart, and very quickly, by the way. And we could see the Chinese starting to take other measures as well, stopping supplies of important materials to the United States, and perhaps also the Chinese taking further steps to strengthen their relations with their allies. Now, the key ally, of course, here is Russia. The Chinese might say to themselves, if the Americans are coming after us over Taiwan and are enlisting the Japanese, then we need the Russians fully on side with us. That means we've got to end the war in Ukraine fast. How do we end the war in Ukraine fast? We start doing what we have up to now not done, which is we start sending weapons directly to the Russians. And our massive industrial and manufacturing economy can provide Russia not with 4 million shells or 5 million shells. It could quite easily provide Russia with 100 million shells, which is what the Soviet Union produced every year during the Second World War. So, you can see how this could play out if it isn't handled well. So what Xi Jinping was trying to get Trump to understand is that this is a very dangerous situation, and it's one that could easily turn out very wrong, because for China, as Xi Jinping has repeatedly said, Taiwan is a red line that China will never back away from. If Xi Jinping were to back away from Taiwan, the issue of Taiwan's reunification with China, he would cease to be Chinese leader very fast.
Yeah, I think Xi Jinping has finally realized that they have no reverse gear.
No.
Right, the United States, no matter what deals you come up with, trade or negotiations, the pressure is never going to stop. It's never going to end. The desire to bring China to heel, right?
Yes,
the U.S. unipolar hegemon desire to bring China to heel is never going to go away. And I think from the U.S. side of things, they realize that time's running out for them.
Absolutely.
I think the trade negotiations were a big wake-up call for all of the neocons and the deep staters who were talking about how they have all the leverage on China, and China's an insignificant power compared to us, like the Scott Bessents of the Trump administration. We have all the leverage. We're going to handle China, no problem. We're the hegemon. They're weaker than us, and then you get into the trade talks, and China's like, okay, no rare earths, and that was it. Game over.
Yes.
Right. So I think that was a wake up call to all of these guys to say, you know what, we need to get this whole military encircling China, Taiwan thing. We have to get this moving quickly because time is running out. China is getting stronger and stronger, if not already economically stronger. They're also getting militarily stronger, and we have to deal with Ukraine. We have to figure out we're bogged down in Ukraine. What do we do there?
Yeah.
So I think this is what's driving a lot of this. But no doubt, to me, Xi Jinping has finally realized, if you didn't know this already, that the U.S. they have no reverse gear. The neocons have no freaking reverse gear on any of this stuff, and he's never going to get them to back down. To be quite honest.
Yes, you're completely right about the neocons. And by the way, just to emphasize the point, underline the point you've just made, a couple of weeks ago, a report appeared that was published by Rand, a Rand report, which actually suggested a change of policy towards China, seeking some kind of rapprochement and understanding with China. And a lot of people became very excited about this, including, by the way, in China, and said that the American ship is changing direction, and this is a sign that the neocons are losing this argument. What then happened about a week ago was that Rand suddenly deleted that article. So it was a sign that report not obviously raised hackles with a lot of people. There were clearly complaints about this, and the report was deleted, which again tells you who is in the ascendant here. It's exactly the people you said, the people who have no reverse gear. Now, the Chinese, by the way, have struggled to understand this. I can remember long ago, not so long ago, actually, a few years ago, back in 2014, to be precise, I remember being told by somebody from China, that we in China, we understand the Americans very well. We managed to get on with them. We have no problems with them. Our trade is doing so well. Why can't the Russians do as we do? What is it with these Russians that they end up all the time getting themselves into conflicts with the Americans? And I tried to point out that actually, the Americans are not quite as easy to handle as you appear to think. And I can remember this person didn't quite understand me. And that was a very, very strong and persistent view in Beijing, in China, for a very long time. And it's only, I think, in the last 3 or 4 years that the Chinese leadership has begun to understand that, in fact, things are not as easy with the United States as they'd imagined. That is, the Russians had problems with the Americans. It was not just because the Russians were clumsy and bungling and incompetent, but because everybody, in the end, has trouble with the Americans. And it's taken a long time for the Chinese to come to this point, but I think you're right. I think they now have.
两位博主说得很对，任何一届日本政府 即便是最右翼、最民族主义的日本政府都不敢单独在台海问题上对中国放肆，除非他确信得到了美国的支持。如果没有来自华盛顿高层的指示或默许，东京没有这个胆量来触碰中国的红线。当前在台海问题上兴风作浪的看似是日本，但真正的操盘手肯定是华盛顿。美国为什么要在这个时候玩这一手？很简单，美国在贸易战中无法战胜中国，并且因为稀土问题被中国拿捏得极为被动，正面经济对决无法取胜，他就必然会在其他领域寻找新的筹码。而台湾问题无疑就是那个他眼中最合适的切入口，因为这是中国红线中的红线，是全体中国人心中最坚定的核心利益，但也是最深的痛点。多年来，帝国主义亡我之心不死这句老话已经不怎么再被提起，最多偶尔成为大家嘴中用来调侃的一句玩笑话。但你仔细想想，这句老话其实并没有过时，它描述的并非霸权国家一时的政策，而是他们一种近乎本能的行为模式。美国无法容忍任何一个潜在对手与其分享权力，更不用说挑战其霸权地位。但在西太平洋，特别是在第一岛链之内，美国的军事优势正在相对削弱，中国的区域拒止反介入能力日益增强。美国不愿意也不敢在此时此地与中国发生直接军事对抗，所以我们看到了它的战略调整。一方面将部分力量后撤到第二岛链以保存实力，另一方面他绝不甘心轻易放弃经营多年的第一岛链。就像视频里提到的乌克兰计划在东亚的复制，他选中了盟友体系中实力最强、与中国有历史恩怨和现实地缘矛盾的日本。这一次有很大的可能就是美国要求日本跳出来当马前卒，在台海问题上进行挑衅和测试，看看中国的反应强度，试探我们的底线究竟在何处。美国决策层内部目前可能评估认为中国现在还不打算动武，或者说还没有到动武的最佳时机。国际上流传的一种说法，认为到2027年中美力量对比会达到一个关键的顶点，中国的综合国力最强，而美国相对最弱。在这个窗口期到来之前，美国试图通过让日本等盟友不断挑衅来打乱中国的节奏。不要忘记，特朗普以狡诈和热衷于交易艺术著称，他当然希望中国会为了换取台海的暂时平静，注意是暂时，而在其他领域做出实质性让步。而一旦美国觉得实力重占上风，或是解决了稀土这类关键问题，他一定会迅速变脸，不会丝毫犹豫与中国兵戎相见。中国是要破釜沉舟，先下手为强，还是以我为主，保持战略定力？这种节奏的把握最难，最考验战略智慧。但无论如何，都必须彻底放弃对美国的一切不切实际的幻想。不能幻想美国会改变其遏制中国的战略本性，不能幻想通过一时的让步可以换来永久的和平。